I started a weight loss support group a couple of years ago, and I wanted to have like, here's what you need to do in a booklet. So I made this little e-booklet called The 10 Tenets to Sustainable Weight Loss, summarizing what does this look like? What is the plan? What is the program? And so here are the 10 tenets. We're going to go through all of them. So in the first chapter of the book is choose, find your purpose, choose your weight, determine your timeline. And then the second chapter is systematize, where we go into eating plants, learning to recognize hunger and satiety, don't break the seal, stop counting, set a schedule, monitor meal volume, and master monotony. So let's go through all of those. I realized the hard way that you can't convince someone to do this. There's no point. You have to want it. And the way I say that is that you could lead a human to healthy, but you can't make them eat. For the first few years, first of all, plant-based wasn't a big thing back then. They didn't say plant-based necessarily. So it was just starting to grow and expand. And my goodness, how has it expanded? It's extraordinary where we are today. But back then, I was trying to convince everyone I knew, like, you need to eat this way. It's amazing. Look at the science, look at the facts, look at the before and afters, and I was beating my head against the wall. And clients would come to me with something and I would try to convince them. And it was like so stressful. And I was so disappointed because I want to be effective. I want to help people. That's why I'm doing what I do. Like, I want to change people's lives. And I spent all this time trying to convince people, and it wasn't so efficacious. It just wasn't working as well as I wanted it to. And it wasn't until I finally had this aha moment where I was like, oh my gosh, forget it. I'm not going to convince anyone. I'm just going to be a lighthouse, not a tugboat, right? That's the expression. So I decided I will never try to convince anyone again. People always ask me, how do I convince so-and-so and such and such? You can't. I could only take care of myself. But if anyone comes to me, they want to make these changes, they want to transform their health, they want to lose the 10 pounds, the last 10 pounds or the 100 pounds that they've been carrying around for a long time that they're struggling with, I will love you all the way through. And I love my clients, and we have such an incredible deep dive relationship. We get so close going through this journey because it's so deeply personal, but I can't convince them. And I was really hit over the head with this lesson last year. I shared this in my talk last week or a week and a half ago, where my father, or I guess it was in the panel, my father had a stroke about a year ago. He's always kind of like laughed at me and what I do, my crazy diet and my crazy whatever. He's heard me speak. He says he's read my books. I don't know how much he's done of all that, but he just kind of chuckles. And, he has no interest whatsoever in changing his diet. And he had a stroke last year. And when he finally was conscious enough, we were on FaceTime because he was out of the country and I couldn't get there because of COVID and my passport and blah, blah, blah. And we got onto a FaceTime and I said, Dad, what's going on? And he said, my diet was just not so good while I was here. I'm like, okay, well, I could help you with that. And he looked at me and he goes, Jewel, you have to want it. And that was it. He was right. He had no interest in it. And then his doctor corroborated that and, said to him, oh, just don't drink alcohol or caffeine and don't worry about your diet. It doesn't matter. So he got all the words he wanted and he moved on with his life. And the other night he had chicken parmesan when we went out to dinner. Sorry, Dad, for throwing you out the bus. But anyway, I just realized, you know what, no matter what, even the people you love the most, and people ask me every day, how do I convince my dad or my son or my friend or my husband or my whatever? And you can't, you have to want it. So the first thing I have my clients do is define their purpose. Why do you want it? What does it look like to you to be at this place where you are in the driver's seat? You know exactly what to eat, why you're eating it, when you eat, your whole psychology, how to deal in social situations. What does that look like for you? And for some people, it's as important or deep because there's no judgment here ever. It's, as like, I want to be there for my grandchildren, or there's people that I just want to look good in my bathing suit this summer. All of it is great. It doesn't matter what drives you. You have to want it. That did that on itself. So I have them write out their why. And there's something very powerful about putting ideas from your head into words and into writing. So I recommend they actually write down their why, and they could always edit and add and change, but they could refer to it. And a lot of my clients have a lot of results from when they're in a moment where they're being tempted, because you're always going to have those, where they'll look at their why and that's what stops them. So it's an accountability thing too. It's visualizing it, it's putting into reality. So it's important to know why you're doing that. So that's the first step. The second step is choose your weight. Now, that might sound interesting, like choose your weight, but yeah, this is all about choosing. That's what Choose You Now is about. You get to choose your weight. When my dance teacher told me I needed to lose weight and my manager told me to lose weight, that was them putting that on me, but it's my body overall, right? I get to make that decision. And so I want to empower my clients to choose. You get to choose, and here are the tools to choose. And we could always, change all of that. It's malleable. It's definitely, you have control over this. So I'll talk about this in the next slide, but I use the Hamwe formula to determine an ideal body weight range based on just statistics and averages of what's healthy. And it's a big wide range. We'll talk about that in a second. And then I'd have them determine their timeline. My clients lose 0.4 to 0.8 pounds a day of body fat, predictably so, if they want. That's max speed ahead. And then you can go slower if you want to incorporate or maintain a healthy exercise routine because you don't want to let go of that for a period of time. That's fine too. It just goes a little bit slower. So we determine the timeline based on my client's goals. So this formula, the Hamwe formula, it's a basic formula. Most people use this as a reference. And basically it uses gender and height as the determining factors. So for men, they get about 106 pounds for 5 feet, then 6 pounds per inch after that. And for women, it's 100 pounds for 5 feet and then 5 pounds per inch after that. So I'm about 5'4". I'm going to round up a little. So about 120. And that's like a 108 plus or minus 10%, 108 to 132, something like that. So that's a big wide range. And then I have my clients say, okay, so once you get into that range, because I don't want to encourage anyone to go lower, of course, but in that range, where do you feel the best? How do you feel in your clothing at this size? And how do you feel, with your exercise? And is this a weight that's easy to maintain? So we kind of play with all those numbers as we get towards those numbers and get into those. So it's something that we just use as a reference. I also use a scale. A lot of dietitians are anti-scale and a lot of people are afraid of the scale. But if we could uncouple a scale from any kind of judgment, it's just data. We need data. We have to have information. And the scale isn't looking up at you and saying, oh, you've been hitting the cookies. The scale has no judgment. It's just information for you. And if you could uncouple that from the emotional thing about it, it will help you because then you have a tool. Other tools I use are measurements. My thing is moving on its own. How is it doing that? Maybe it's using pre-recorded rehearsal times or something. Anyway, measuring yourself at different points, the same points, maybe once a month or twice a month, depending on how quickly you're going, that's helpful too. And then your clothing, of course, it's going to adjust as you move down. But, remember that we don't see ourselves in 3 dimension, and this body dysmorphia thing is very real. We don't see ourselves. We don't really see ourselves the way other people see us. And it's really interesting. I deal a lot with that with my clients, and it's hard to understand. But like when you look at a photo and you think you're seeing a certain version of yourself, it's not necessarily as accurate as it may be to someone else. So we don't really see ourselves in that way. And so that's why using these tools is kind of helpful, just to have some more objective forms of measurement. And then I love the food journal. So food journal is a great tool for everyone, no matter what you're doing, because it helps with accountability. You have to write it. If you're going to take a bite, you got to write it down. It helps with, you're basically making a historical reference. So if you want to go back and see what was working, what wasn't working, you could always have a food journal. I do this with all my clients. I also work with people that are trying to determine their food allergies and people that are trying to recover from an illness, all of those things. And a food journal helps with symptoms and to assess, and to put things together. Because how many of you remember what you had for breakfast yesterday? Not everyone remembers, so it's having it documented, when that symptom happened, what your weight was, all of those things. The more information you have, the more data you have, the better you can make an assessment and a plan. I always tell my clients, I want you to have a PhD in weight loss in your body when you're done with me. And then we're going to get another PhD in weight loss maintenance or healthy weight maintenance, because it's a whole other world. And they're both so important, because the subtitle of my book is Lose Weight for the Last Time. The reason for that is how many of you have been on this diet roller coaster? So many people have been on this diet roller coaster, whether it's 10 pounds or 100 pounds. So many people come to me, they've lost and gained throughout their life. That's why the most important part of this is maintenance, is when you hit that low weight, that goal weight, that's when the diet actually begins. And we'll talk about that later. So food journal, very helpful. And then determining your timeline just has to do with how quickly you want to rip off the Band-Aid, or do you want to go a little slower? I work with all sorts of people. It depends on where they are in their life and what's going on. So you can do either way.